I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the acceptance letter. My heart raced as I read the words over and over again. I had finally made it into the university of my dreams. It was a moment I had worked so hard for, and yet, as I read the letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My excitement began to fade, replaced by a growing anxiety. My husband, Mark, had been unusually quiet lately, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something from me. This moment should have been joyful, but something felt deeply off, like a storm was about to hit. That evening, I gathered my courage to tell Mark about the good news. I was excited to share my achievement with him, but when I handed him the letter, his reaction was not what I expected. He barely glanced at the letter before tossing it aside. "That's great," he said, but his tone was flat, almost indifferent. "But we can't afford the tuition." I felt the blood drain from my face. What was he talking about? We had planned for this day for so long. We had saved up every penny, and now, suddenly, he was saying we couldn't afford it? My mind raced, but I couldn't make sense of his words. "What do you mean we can't afford it?" I asked, my voice trembling as I tried to stay calm. Mark didn't meet my eyes. He just shrugged, a cold look crossing his face. "I've already used the money," he said, his words slow and deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest. "Used it for what?" I asked, barely able to speak. Mark didn't seem fazed by my reaction. "I used it for something important," he said, like it was no big deal. I stared at him in disbelief. What could possibly be more important than my education, my future? Why was he acting like this was normal? Mark seemed to hesitate, as if he was trying to figure out how much to tell me. "I used the money for Sarah," he said finally, the words hanging in the air. "Sarah? Our daughter, yes. But what could be so important that it would drain all of our savings?" "What do you mean? What for?" I demanded, feeling my anger rising. "Her dance classes," Mark said, his voice cold and emotionless. I couldn't believe my ears. He had spent all the money we had saved for my college tuition on Sarah's dance classes? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "You used it all? On that?" I couldn't stop the disbelief from slipping into my voice. Mark didn't seem to understand the gravity of what he had just said. He wasn't even sorry. He just kept looking at me like this was no big deal. "Yeah, I had to," he said, shrugging. "You know how important dance is to Sarah? She's talented." I felt like I had been slapped. I worked so hard for this, and he had just thrown it all away. "Are you serious?" I whispered, unable to hold back my frustration. "You spent all of it? You knew how important this was to me, and you spent it on her dance?" I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of him. I had to stay strong, for myself and for Jenna. My mind spun as I tried to process what was happening. How could he be so careless? How could he spend all of our savings without even considering the consequences? "Mark, do you realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've ruined everything. You've taken away my future." Mark finally looked up at me, but there was no remorse in his eyes. "Look, I didn't think you'd get in. It was just a gamble," he said nonchalantly. "We couldn't afford to keep saving for both of you." A sharp pain shot through my chest. He had gambled with my future, with my dream, like it was nothing. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. I felt a rush of anger flood through me, but I bit my lip to stop myself from yelling. "How could you do this?" I asked, trying to stay calm, though my voice was shaking. "I've been working my entire life to get here, and you just threw it all away for her?" Mark didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the floor like he didn't care. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. How could I be married to someone who could be so selfish, so thoughtless? I had always tried to be patient with him, tried to understand, but this was too much. This was beyond forgiveness. I needed space. I needed to think. I walked away from him, trying to clear my head. I couldn't look at him anymore. As I paced around the house, I felt a deep sense of loss. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, seemed to be slipping away. And for what? For Sarah's dance classes? I could feel the weight of the situation crushing me. The dream I had worked so hard to build was gone, shattered by Mark's careless decisions. I had to do something. I had to take control of my life. But I didn't know where to start. The future felt so uncertain now. As I walked through the house, I found myself thinking about Jenna. She was my rock, the one who had always been there for me. I had promised her that I would make things work, no matter what, but now it seemed like I couldn't even keep that promise. I felt like I was failing her. She was excited about my acceptance, and now I was letting her down. I walked into her room, feeling my heart heavy with guilt. "Jenna, we need to talk," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. She looked up from her book, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's wrong, Mom?" Jenna sat up and looked at me with concern in her eyes. I hesitated, unsure of how to break the news. "We're going to have to figure out something else. Mark, he spent all the money we saved for college. It's gone." For a moment, Jenna didn't say anything. Her eyes widened in shock, and I could see the confusion and hurt in them. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped, unable to find the words. I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm sorry, Jenna. I don't know what to do. I thought we had it all figured out." The guilt in my chest was suffocating. Jenna just sat there for a moment, staring at me. I could see her mind working, trying to make sense of what I had just said. "It's okay, Mom," she said finally, her voice soft. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Her words were calm, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she believed it, but I was grateful for her strength. I hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of emotion. She was the one thing that still felt like a bright light in the darkness. I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to make this right for her. I couldn't fail her. The next few days were a blur of searching for options. I didn't want to rely on Mark anymore. I couldn't trust him with something this important. I looked into loans, scholarships, and grants. I even considered part-time jobs, anything to make up for the lost money. But the more I searched, the more I realized how difficult it would be. The pressure was overwhelming. How could I fix this? How could I make sure Jenna still had a chance at the future she deserved? Every time I found a solution, it felt like another door slammed shut in my face. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep fighting. One night, just when I thought I had exhausted all options, I received a call. It was from a financial advisor I had reached out to weeks ago. "I think I've found a solution," he said. I listened, my heart racing. He explained an investment opportunity. It was risky, but if it worked out, it could cover Jenna's tuition. I was hesitant. It seemed too good to be true. But at this point, I had nothing left to lose. I agreed to take a chance. Maybe it was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. I felt a glimmer of hope, something I hadn't felt in days. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to get everything in place. I took out a loan to make the investment happen, but if it paid off, I could cover Jenna's tuition and more. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't trust him, and I didn't want to hear his excuses. I was doing this on my own, for Jenna's future. I kept the plan a secret, not even telling Jenna what I was doing. She had enough to worry about. The pressure was mounting, but I couldn't stop. I had come too far. This was my chance to turn things around, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. When I finally got the news, I couldn't believe it. The investment had paid off. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to cover Jenna's tuition. Enough to change her future. I cried. I couldn't help it. It was relief, joy, and exhaustion all mixed together. I had done it. Jenna's future was secure. I couldn't wait to tell her. When I told Jenna the good news, she hugged me tightly, her face beaming with happiness. "You did it, Mom," she said. I could see the relief in her eyes, and I felt it too. This was our victory, and nothing could take it away from us. The day Jenna left for college was bittersweet. I watched her pack up her things, my heart full of pride and sadness. She was ready to start a new chapter, one that I had fought for. It felt like the end of one journey and the beginning of another. I had done everything I could to give her this opportunity, and now she had the chance to build her own future. As she walked out the door, I felt a wave of mixed emotions. The house was quieter now, but I knew that this was just the beginning. Jenna was ready for the world, and so was I.